Welcome to PHRP Perspectives, your go-to resource for navigating ethics, compliance, and best practices in human subjects research. Each episode delivers expert insights, practical advice, and real-world stories to help you stay ahead and make informed decisions. PHRP Perspectives is brought to you by PHRP Online Training.
Earn your certification for Human Subjects Protection Training with PHRP Online Training. PHRP offers 2 courses: PHRP Online Training for biomedical or clinical topics, and PHRP SBE, which is designed for social, behavioral, and educational research. Continuing education credits are available for a variety of professionals. PHRP Online Training is available in English, Spanish, and French. Learn more at phrptraining.com.
And now, here is PHRP Perspectives, Ethics, Research, and Compliance. Hello, I'm your host, Susan Cord, and joining us on PHRP Perspectives are Kim Dicciani, PHRP Advisory Board member, and her guest, Christine Wallace. Today's episode is Non-Human Subjects Determinations. Here's a little bit about our guest today. Kim is the Human Research Compliance Manager for Fairleigh Dickinson University. She is an experienced specialist in human research protection for social, behavioral, and medical research, as well as in adult and pediatric biomedical ethics. She has a demonstrated history of working in the higher education and hospital research sectors for more than 25 years. Kim has also served on the faculty of Public Responsibility in Medicine and Research Organization. And in addition to her role at Fairleigh Dickinson and as a PHRP advisory member, she also serves as an IRB member of the MD Anderson Cancer Center. Christine Wallace is a regulatory advisor at Brown University with more than a decade of experience in higher education, specializing in human research compliance and ethical oversight. She is passionate about advancing research integrity and addressing the unique ethical considerations with social, behavioral, and educational research. In addition to her role at Brown, she serves as an IRB member for Etica Research Solutions and co-facilitates the SBER network. Kim and Christine, thank you for joining us. Welcome to you both. Kim, start off by telling us why this topic and why have this conversation with Christine.
Thanks so much, Susan. So first, we thought that this would be a great session because human research determinations can be somewhat confusing. The federal regulations kind of read like IKEA instructions when you're trying to build your desk, where you have to go all over the place to see what fits where, A, B, and D, and then you have to grab the ZZ. So what we're going to do today is we're going to assist our IRB members and also our researchers on what is human subjects research, how does it get reviewed, what should you do, and anything else that could be exempt or from there. Thanks, Christine, so much for coming today. And so what is research with human subjects, Christine?
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited to be here today to talk about this subject. So it's really a foundational question, and it involves 2 definitions. So the first one we're going to look at is it research? So to determine if it's research, is it a systematic investigation that's designed to develop or contribute to generalizable knowledge? So essentially, is there a plan or a method for collecting and analyzing the data? And what is the intent to share the results? Are you going to extend it beyond the immediate context? Are you going to apply those findings to a broader population? So the next part is determine if there is human subjects. So are you obtaining the data through intervention or interaction with living individuals, or are you collecting identifiable private data or biospecimens? So it's not just about studying the people, it's
Right.
about collecting the data in a way that directly involves the individuals or their private information.
Right. I also think the 2 important things that you said were intent. I know there's confusion about, well, I intend to do research, I want to publish, but sometimes even just publication does not make it human subjects research. And I think that is one of the confusions because automatically it goes to publication. Well, then that's going to generalizable knowledge. But really, research is where it's a new, novel concept where there's a hypothesis that the researcher has to support or negate to collect data to show that there's an actual efficacy or change or something that could improve, whether it's in medical standard of care or change standard of care, or in social behavioral education we go more to, change standard day of business is kind of what I use to kind of separate the medical from the social behavioral. And I think one of the other things that's confusing, as we said, what is the intent, um, that people can kind of get tripped up on is whether it's performance improvement or program evaluation. And so program evaluation, is where you're just going to internally collect data to see if something is working in within your institution, or it's a policy or a practice, that you want to evaluate, but you're not necessarily evaluating human subjects. You're not gaining private information when it's policy and practice, right? Um,
Correct. And I think that's a really great thing to kind of talk about more. Let's like take for example, you have a new advising program, and you want to review it for internal purposes to see if it's working. All of that would fall under a not human research determination. But if you wanted to go then, publish it, present it at a national conference, and say, hey, if you were to do this at your institution, this could be the effect. And these things could happen to help your, advising population.
right.
Then we're starting to go into that intent to contribute to a generalizable knowledge.
Agreed. And I think it's also really important that people realize they should really look and to their IRB and to the institution to determine what is exactly human subjects research at their institution. At my institution, we go by the definitions. However, we're a small research institution. So sometimes, even though it may not directly meet the definition, it might be a little bit outside of that generalizable knowledge, or if there are questions that kind of go on the cusp of privacy or not opinion based. I believe that opinions sometimes can kind of get misconstrued as that's private because it depends on what the opinions are about. So usually it's a if you're requesting for, about a product, marketing research, if you are asking people about a certain type of, a beverage, like say Coca-Cola, or, now I'm going to get probably in trouble for sponsoring Coca-Cola or something like
Just
that,
just
or
mention another beverage like Pepsi or
or
something. We'll
Pepsi,
even it out.
if you want to have
Yeah.
Coke and Pepsi and you have to figure out which one is better, you're evaluating a product. You might be getting an opinion about the taste. You might be getting an opinion about the can or the colors, but you're not getting private information about the individual, which is important. Private information would be something you would share within a medical evaluation or in a standard mental health evaluation, something about yourself or the person that they wouldn't necessarily share outside of the research. And that's really important to look at the intent. So, what would be considered research that is not human subjects that would not have to be reviewed and approved by the IRB? And we're also going to talk a little bit too about how some institutional IRBs have human research determinations.
Right. So, essentially, what you're looking at for something that's going to receive a not human subjects research determination is something that isn't having an interaction or intervention with a living individual, or you're not collecting identifiable private information or biospecimens. So, in practice, we look at a few key factors. First we look at that, is it research? Once we determine that, we also look at that human subjects definition. If we're getting information that is already de-identified and we don't have access to like a master list that can
Hmm.
re-identify, or the information was all collected completely anonymously and there's no way to re-identify, and you're looking at that like as a secondary data set, then you can get a not human subjects determination. Some general things like internal program evaluations, they're typically considered not human subjects research. A lot of secondary data analysis that is completely de-identified is also. Also projects that are purely educational. So
Hmm.
at Brown, we have a lot of students doing, undergrads in particular, doing research within their classrooms that's not going to be, contributing to generalizable knowledge. It's purely for them to get the education and kind of that experience.
Agreed, completely. I think one of the keys is there's a difference between anonymous and de-identified. I
Right.
find that's confusing for some researchers. So I think one thing is we should define those. And an anonymous is different from de-identified because the de-identification there is at once a link or a link to an identifier. So de-identified is when you take out that link before you give that data to a person. So you de-identify it, or you de-identify it by changing the direct identifier to say a code number, either random or a different type of code number. Where anonymous is you cannot ascertain at all where this data came from. You have no access to any identifiers, meaning date of birth, name, social security number, any other student ID number at a university, even vehicle identification numbers are considered an identifier. So when it's completely stripped of all of that, and you as the investigator cannot ascertain where that data came from, and you ask for them to complete a survey with no identifiable information, they put the survey in a box and you can't re-identify them, that is anonymous. Where de-identified, you actually could re-identify someone if you have a code key. If you have a code key that is telling you that link to the identifier to that specific survey, that link to that specific interview at the time is identifiable, but you can de-identify it by using a code instead of the direct name, which is one thing that I always request investigators to do, just so that we are not holding on or retaining to information that is not necessary, because it is private information. It's a way to identify someone and to contact someone. So I think that's an important delineation. Also, one thing that would not be considered human subjects research is a data set that's provided to from another institution to an investigator where the investigator was not involved in the original data collection and the investigator cannot have access to re-identify by being given that code key. Now we're going to segue into what the difference is between not human subjects research and human subjects research that's exempt. And one of the ones that always trips me up, and I know it trips up other investigators, and Christine, you and I have talked about this, is when is publicly available data considered not human subjects research, and when would it be considered or bumped up to an exempt determination?
Right. And that is one of the gray areas that really depends on the context. Publicly available can be very um, difficult
Hmm.
sometimes to figure out.
Right.
So I always go off of if any member of the public can access it freely without special permissions or logins or agreements, then it is publicly available data. Some examples of that are like the US Census Bureau
Hmm.
data sets from the NIH, CDC, um, even publishing things in books, newspapers, public records, like court documents also can fall into that category. But where things get rough
Right.
is really in social media.
Yes.
Just
Very
because a
tricky.
post, yeah, exactly. I mean, just because a post is on Instagram or Reddit doesn't mean that it's automatically public. If a group, let's say a Facebook group, is private and requires approval to access, just because you can gain access to it doesn't mean that you can have, the carve out for not human subjects research with publicly available data. And I also apply, if there's a login wall, even if it's free, I think that there's a big question mark, and you should kind of dive in more to see if it's really publicly available data.
Right, because you still have to get a permission. You have to create a username, you have to get a password, and sometimes it even involves what are data use agreement.
Right.
So where you're collecting the data from another institution and you want to use it, you still have to get permissions, and the data use agreement will have all the parameters for the securities of the use of that data. One other item as well, in especially with publicly available data and social media and also internet use, is you really, before you do anything with that data, or you're going to be using an app or some other type of internet based I don't know, survey generator, or even data through I'm trying to think of those, Second Life or other types of virtual
Mhm.
environments where you want to do research. Is I think it's important that investigators also check user agreements and see exactly what you are allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Because I have seen user agreements that will state this information cannot be used for research purposes. And or I've seen, the legalese where it's kind of says you can't use it, but then all of a sudden in the next statement it says, well, maybe you can. So when in doubt, I think investigators and teams always need to know to contact their IRB. If there's ever a question in your mind, you're not sure if what you're doing is human subjects research or whatever type of review, it's always better to ask first than instead of just doing that and going forward with that, because it's a responsibility of both the researcher and the IRB to make sure, one, that all of our research teams are educated and know what human subjects research is, and also have the ability to determine what not human subjects research is, and also to be open enough that IRBs should be approachable, that they should be able to have those conversations and have those researchers call them and say, hey, I'm not sure what I'm doing. I just want to make sure, Kim, that you don't need to look at this before I move forward. And that's when I always say, hey, let's check it out. That's why I'm really excited to be using the new human research determination form that we're going to be creating at my institution, so that will also help them with the tools. And there's other tools available too from Office of Human Research Protection. There are actual guides and trees that can help you determine whether what you're doing is human subjects research or not. Especially now, there's even the question of decedent information. Now, death records and certain information is now owned by Ancestry.com, which makes it a little bit more difficult because this is a publicly accessible site, and you can get data that's identifiable. And then it's, what do you do there? Is it publicly available information? Is it human subjects research? One of the definitions of human subject is they have to be living, has to be a living
Mhm.
individual. Have you had any experience with that yet at all, Christine? I know, no, I haven't yet, but I know it's coming.
I haven't yet. I think we're going to be facing a lot more of these really on the line kind of things where it's publicly available, as in it's easy to access,
Hmm.
but it's also private and sensitive information. So I think there's going to be a lot of community conversations that are
Right.
going to have to go around this because, with a death record, sure, it's absolutely not a living individual at that point. However, can those things also be linked to living individuals? I think there's a lot of discussion that has to go around there, and kind of back to like responsibility of like the IRB, responsibility of the researcher. It really has to be a collaborative effort,
Agreed.
and understanding like the researcher needs to know if the project might involve human subjects. They need to be able to kind of determine, under those definitions, whether or not they need to come to the IRB and ask more questions. At Brown, we really, really believe in collaboration with our researchers, and we communicate to them that they should be reaching out early and often, especially if something sits in a gray area. And for a lot of these projects, they do. So, like, we have a self-determination tool at Brown, and it's really used as an educational tool. It's meant for people to kind of see the regulations, see these
Mhm.
definitions in a way that they might more easily understand and start a conversation with us.
Right.
Um, and then if they need to come to us, like, let's say if they have a funder or a journal that's going to require something from the IRB, then we can have them do like a formal submission to us to get that information. Um, but it really is a great kind of guidance tool to get that kind of collaborative effort going.
I agree. A human research protection program is not just the IRB. Accreditation services say that a research protection program is the research team, the institution, the IRB, any other type of ethical regulatory offices, such as your export control, your IACUC, your biosafety committee, your privacy committee. There's so many other pieces, and one of the things is that if we all communicate, we all work as a team together, and we all come up with answers or our interpretations of the regulations, that is way better than trying to do it on your own, trying to figure some of this. I mean, I've been in this field for over 25 years. I still get tripped up on the regulations and the definitions. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll say, a student will call me like, Kim, what do I do? I'll be like, I don't know. Like, and then I'll say, let's figure it out, because you're right on the cusp there. You're right on the line. So it just becomes, when everyone is open, the communication is open, it makes so much more for a smooth and easier process, which also enhances compliance, which is the goal, because you want to be compliant, you want to get grants, you want to get funding, you want your research to move forward, because as a society we need research. Research is what builds so that we can be stellar in our science, our education, and we have to keep growing as a community, and as a research community, and as a field. One of the things that you brought up, Christine, was about journals. That I've been getting a number of requests from investigators who are very nervous that if their project is not reviewed by the IRB, and it's not human subjects research, but they don't have that approval letter, that determination letter for the journal, they'd get very, it becomes very stressful. It's a stressful situation. So one of the things that we've done is we're going to be using the self-determination tool to assist, so that the investigator has that. But can an investigator find out before they even conduct their research if there is that type of statement is needed?
Absolutely. I mean, most researchers that I've at least encountered understand which journals that they're probably going to be applying to. And from what I've seen, I think I would be within the realm of saying most journals publish what their criteria are.
Okay.
And so if they're going to need to have some sort of statement from the IRB saying that, this received approval, it's exempt, or this is not human subjects research, you can find out that information. If you're looking at a journal and you don't see on their, website or in their materials that they are going to need it, I would reach out to them and
Hmm.
say, hey, before I start this project, I need to know if I'm going to need this, because and this has happened unfortunately many times, particularly to students, where they go off, they do their research, they think it's not human subjects, and then they go to apply for the journal. They say, hey,
Yeah.
where's your letter?
Uh,
And they come to us and we go, ooh, actually this is human subjects research and we can't approve it retroactively.
right. No
And so
retroactive approvals. Can't do
so
it.
I always tell people, like, just come talk to the IRB. It's, a consultation, at least with me, 15, 20 minutes
Right.
most of the time, we can work out all the things you're going to need to do for more complex studies. And of course, it takes a little bit more time. But sometimes it's just some clarifying questions to like orient where your research is going to end up.
I agree. And I think another thing that's really important is when you're doing human subjects research or any research, you need a timeline and you need to consider that consultation with the IRB. Prep for your journals that you really want to apply to for, after the research is completed. It's better off doing everything way before and making a longer timeline instead at the end when you're now, oh, now I'm going to apply to those journals, I'm already done. You didn't get an IRB review, we can't do retroactive approval, then you're kind of stuck. So I think one of the ways that we can definitely end our conversation is on the, if you don't know, call, email,
Yes.
and ask. And we have the tools as IRB professionals and working with human research protection to assist you in making sure that you're compliant. And the ultimate goal is that we want you to do your research and get great research going for our institutions.
Absolutely. I'll just chime in very quickly here and say, I've run into a lot of people that, the IRB is a scary thing to come and talk
Hmm.
to. But honestly, I haven't met a professional yet that hasn't wanted to help people with their research, to make them get through the process as painlessly as possible and, get them to doing their important research. So I always just say, reach out to your IRB, go out for a consultation, and kind of like really look at that timeline to make sure, everything's going to fall in line, and you are successful in your research.
It's very important to network and to speak with your colleagues, look at certain areas like the Social Behavioral Education Research Network, other PHRP, other types of organizations so that you're not, and just know you're not in this alone and that we are here to help you get your research moving forward.
Thank you, Christine and Kim, for joining us today and sharing such great advice. If you have any questions about this topic, you can reach out to us at info@phrptraining.com. We certainly hope that you will subscribe to PHRP Perspectives and join us again next time.